It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Joan Peterson, Senior Facilitator at Bluepoint Leadership Development. Joan has over 15 years of experience in the leadership development field, working both as an internal resource and an external consultant. She is a highly skilled facilitator and is passionate about developing leaders. So welcome, Joan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Julie. Thank you. I appreciate that introduction.
Great. My pleasure.
I'd like to welcome everybody to Igniting Performance one conversation at a time. I'd like for you to imagine that you meet someone new tomorrow and you readily welcome that person into your life. What kind of qualities would that person need to have for you to readily welcome them? If you're anybody or anything like me, our life is already full with a lot of people that we don't really have enough time to reach out to for them every day. So what kind of qualities would a person need to have for us to readily welcome them? I'd like for you to imagine that this person sees the best in us. They not only see the best in us, but they see our potential. And when they immediately see our potential, they don't see the potential that we see in ourselves. They see a potential that's greater than that. I'd like for you to imagine that this person not only sees this potential, but they let us know about it. They confront us with that potential. They hold a mirror up to us and show us what the potential that they see in us is. And they hold us accountable to that. They know when we're subtly selling ourselves short. They know when we're not living up to that expectation, that potential. And they hold us to it. They paint that picture of that tomorrow that's better than today for us. And they paint that picture of that potential. And they hold it to us. My guess is that many of us would welcome that kind of person into our lives. My guess is that many of us would readily welcome them, because what would it be like to have someone at work who's so completely on your side? This webinar is about being that person for somebody else. What would it be like if you were that person in somebody else's life? When we talk about igniting performance one conversation at a time, really what we're talking about, and I love this quote by Albert Schweitzer, it says, sometimes our candle goes out, but is blown into flame by an encounter with another human being. I believe that coaching is about blowing that flame, that candle into flame. I believe that our coaching conversations day to day, we can use every opportunity to interact with folks, really to ignite their performance, to light their candle, again, by their encounter with us. My guess is, as you look back over the course of your career, there's been one or two or three people who really are responsible for how you stand in the room as a leader, who really have made you into the leader you are today. My guess is if I asked you, who's the best coach that you've ever had? Perhaps it was a boss early in your career, or perhaps it's a current boss. Maybe it was a teacher sometime in your childhood who saw the potential in you early on, perhaps saw the potential that you didn't see in yourself. Maybe it was a childhood coach, a sports coach, who really sought out the talents that you had, again, that maybe you didn't see in yourself. I'd like for you to think about, if somebody asked you the question, who for you was the best coach? Who was your personal best coach? I'd like for you to think about, who would you sort of bring up to the fore? Who would you answer in response to that question? And then next, when you think about that person, what are the traits and characteristics that this person had that really has brought them up to the fore for you, that really identified them as your personal best coach? What was it about them that really helped you succeed in life and at work? What I'd like for you to do is think about the traits and characteristics of this person. And if you wouldn't mind typing in some of these traits and characteristics, what made them different than some of the other people that you've interacted with throughout the course of your work in life? And Julie, I'm going to ask you to come in here and mention the question and answer box.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got positive, we've got went to bat for me, gave me honest feedback is another one, was supportive, was my cheerleader, saw my strengths, challenged me, was direct and honest. Lots of similar ones here, Joan.
Yeah, that's great. And I appreciate you all typing in your responses. When you think about this personal best coach, this person who really has made a difference in your life, we've asked this question all over the world to thousands and thousands of managers. We've asked the same question. We've asked them to identify who's their personal best coach. We've asked them to talk about and tell the story about what did that person do, or what did they say, or what are traits and characteristics that made them special and really had an impact on you. And similar to the kinds of things that Julie called out, here's some of the things that I sort of called out from the thousands and thousands of responses. They saw the best in me. They immediately looked for my strengths, and they saw the best in me. They gave me feedback. They gave me on-the-spot feedback about what they saw me doing right. They challenged me. They not only gave me feedback, and they not only saw the best in me, but they challenged me to be better. They confronted me with my potential and challenged me to be better. They recognized my strengths. They saw what I was good at. They called my attention to it. They saw my potential. Oftentimes the potential that they saw was greater than the potential I saw in myself. They empowered me. They let me make my own decisions. They let me make my own mistakes. They allowed me to figure things out for myself. So when you look at this list, and when I hear thousands and thousands of managers all over the world talk about their personal best coach, here's what we learned as an organization. We learned that what we can't do is tell you what a good coach is, because you already know what that looks like. You all were on the receiving end of this best coach, so you all know what good coaching looks like. So this webinar isn't about 5 easy steps to have a coaching conversation with somebody. This webinar is about how to be more intentional about how we can be this person for other people. This webinar is about how to have a conversation, an everyday conversation, where we can ignite other people's performance because we're coach-like, because we're doing these kinds of things. Here's what else we learned by seeing thousands and thousands of characteristics and traits for people's personal best coach. If you think about it, this is the haunting part here, if we swept all of you off this webinar and we swept in all the people whom you lead every day, and we asked them to tell their personal best coaching story, would their story be about you? Would you be the star of the story? And if not, how might you be more intentional about being that person? Here's the thing about coaching. Just because I'm a manager doesn't earn me the right to coach people. I need to earn that right. And what can I do differently as a result of maybe 1 or 2 or 3 things I pick up here and from my colleagues? What can I do differently to earn that right to star in that person's story, be their personal best coach? The third thing around this is, again, we've seen thousands and thousands of characteristics around people's stories, around their best coach. What we found is that 2 things never pop up on these lists, but people most often go out and do and call coaching. So in other words, giving advice never appears on anybody's list, but oftentimes when we go and we give people advice, we call it coaching. I believe it doesn't appear on anybody's list because it's not coaching. Giving advice is just that, it's giving advice. And as a leader, sometimes it's absolutely appropriate for me to give advice, but it's not really building capability. I'm really telling them what I would do if I were in their shoes. Again, it's giving advice, it's telling them what, it's not building capability. Here's the second thing that doesn't appear.
Hey, Joan, can I just interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
We've got some folks who have just given us some feedback that they're having trouble hearing you. So if you can just speak up a little louder, that would be great.
Sure. I appreciate the feedback, and let me know how I'm doing.
Thanks, Joan.
The second piece that doesn't appear on these lists is this. So the first was give advice. The second is tell war stories. So how often do we go in, and storytelling certainly is a big part of leadership, but how often do we go in, we say, well, it was a dark and stormy night 10 years ago, and I did X, Y, and Z, and really it becomes about us, and it doesn't become about them. So again, war stories, sometimes appropriate as a leader, it's not coaching. So people will say to me, so Joan, if giving advice and telling war stories isn't coaching, well, what is coaching? And you see in front of you the coaching impacts table. You'll see the kinds of things we do as leaders and as managers. We need to direct at times, we need to advise, we need to teach, and we need to coach. Now, if you look at the directing piece, what does directing sound like? Directing sounds like, I need for you to do X, Y, and Z, by X, Y, and Z, and this is how I'd like for you to do it. It's really being very specific about the actions. When you think about who owns the performance agenda, Who owns that particular piece of work? I own it as a leader because I'm telling you exactly what to do and how to do it. Not a whole lot of capability going on there. If you move down the continuum to advising, what does advising sound like? Advising sounds like, here's what I think you should do, here's what I would do. Again, we share the performance agenda, but I own most of it because I'm telling you what I would do in that situation. You make the final decision as the talent, as the person whom I'm leading, but I own the agenda. Down the line, if you look at teaching, teaching builds a little bit more capability around the talent, and it gives them a little bit more of the performance agenda because they're really, if you think about a teacher growing up, they're telling us how to do it, they're showing us how to do it, but we're really doing it ourselves. The far end of the spectrum is coaching. Really the biggest capability in terms of we can build the biggest capability in the folks whom we lead every day by coaching, by doing those things that you talked about, that you thought about around your personal best coach. Think about the kinds of things they did and said. My guess is they didn't do a lot of directing or advising or teaching. They helped you to figure things out for yourself. They allowed you the space and the time to make some mistakes. They saw the potential in you. I'd like for a moment to talk a little bit about the coaching perspective. When we talk about the coaching perspective, what we're talking about is really your view on coaching and the folks whom you lead every day. To do that, I'd like for you to think about the folks whom you lead every day. When you think about the folks, I'd like for you to think about who are your top 2 or 3 performers. So who are your higher performers in your part of the organization? When you think about these top performers, I'd like for you again to type in some of your responses, and I'll ask Julie to call them out. What are the characteristics of these top performers that you have in your mind?
So, Joan, we've got responsive, motivated, self-motivated, driven, efficient, goal-oriented. They go the extra mile. They're dependable. Lots of similar responses here: reliable, dependable, take charge, proactive, competent, willing to learn.
Great. Thanks for that. Thanks, Julie, and thanks for typing again the characteristics of your top performers. My guess is that it wasn't hard to sort of have a picture of 1 or 2 or 3 folks in your organization who fit that bill, and then thinking about what are some of the things that they do or say. Now I'd like for you to think sort of the other side of the spectrum and to think about some of the poorer performers in your organization. When you think about, maybe 2 or 3 folks that you would put on the other end of the continuum, on the poorer performer side. And I'll invite you to type in what are some of the characteristics of those poorer performers now.
So we've got negative, not using their strengths, low self-esteem, complains a lot, they're passive, they miss their deadlines, need a lot of supervision and guidance, they have a Me Too attitude, not focused, play the victim, always looking to someone else for the answers, inconsistent.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Julie, and thanks again for typing in your responses. Again, my guess is not hard to identify, sort of have a picture of that person, and then to be able to call out some of those characteristics. And oftentimes, the lists across organizations look the same, of the top performers and the poorer performers. Here's a question I'd like for you to think about. When you think about it, in whom should you invest your coaching time and energy? So again, if you had to choose, in whom should you invest your coaching time and energies? Your top performers or your poorer performers? There's no right answer to this question. I can argue for both sides. I can give pros and cons, and my guess is you can too. Pros and cons for I want to spend my time on my poor performers. I want to spend my time, my energy on my top performers. Here's why I think it's important for you to at least think about this question and make this decision for yourself. If you don't think about this question, who gets the attention and the energy via default? And is that who you want to get the energy? So I'll invite you to at least spend a few minutes thinking about, who should I invest my coaching time and energy? Because again, I'm managing many things as a leader. I have a limited amount of time. Where do I want to budget it? And then being intentional about on whom I'm spending this time and energy. Here's the other piece. My guess is it was easy to pick out sort of the top performers and the poor performers. The haunting part of this is they know which lists they appear on. We're more transparent than we think. People know how we view them. People know whether they're on our A list, and they know when they're not. Now, if I said to all of you on this call that you're all on somebody's A list, my guess is you'd feel pretty good about yourself. You'd be more engaged at work. You'd be more committed. How many people have ever worked harder for a good boss or a boss who saw the best in us? What if I said to you, you are all at this point on somebody's B list? Think about how that makes you feel. People know whether they're on our A list or our B list. And what we think about them matters. If I'm on somebody's B list, I typically will have one or two reactions. The first is I get very nervous around you because I want to prove you wrong. I want to prove to you that I don't belong on your B list, that I'm capable. And then if I see that's not working, I may or may not get defensive because I don't get it. I don't know why I'm better than this. Think about it. From whom would you want to receive coaching? From a manager who has you on an A list or a manager who has you on a B list? And here's the other thought. My guess is the best coach that you thought about in the beginning, my guess is you were on their A list or pretty close to it. We bring this up for the point that coaches and earning the right to coach really is about seeing the best in people. It's around knowing that people know how we think and our thoughts matter. There's been tons of, we've anecdotal evidence from what we've seen in organizations. We know this to be true. There's been also research and education around this, that people really, they respond to how we think of them. One of the experiments is around, it was called the Red Oak experiment, and teachers were told that they were given a classroom full of academic bloomers. And what they were told was these students may not respond as quickly in the beginning, but you have the best and the brightest, and they're really the academic bloomers within the school. At the end of the year, when they tested those teachers' schools, those teachers' classes, as opposed to other teachers' classrooms, sort of the other part of the experiment, what they found was the teachers who had the classrooms full of academic bloomers, if you will, far excelled in terms of academic performance the other classrooms. Here's how they determined who went into what class. It was all random. So literally the teacher had high expectations because they were told that their classroom was filled with academic bloomers. And the kids lived up to those expectations. Love this quote, which you're about to see on your screen. It says, treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them to become what they're capable of being. Treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them to become what they're capable of being. Really, that's what coaching is about. It's around seeking out the best in people. When we talk about coaching, sometimes when we talk about seeking out the best in people, we don't think of it as a performance building, having a performance building agenda. Coaching is about lifting performance. It's about igniting performance in others. And again, my role as a coach, your role as a leader coach, really is around helping people from that current road that you see on your screen to that new road. It's about being the pipe that connects the two. Here's the secret sauce of leadership coaching. Leadership coaching is around helping people to see an unseen road that's on a new level from that new road. It's around helping people to lift their performance to that unseen level, to that potential that you see in them that perhaps they don't see in themselves. When we talk about coaching in our organization, we use the Great Expectations coaching model as our model for coaching. And when we look at that, again, we don't talk about 5 easy steps to coaching. What we looked at is what are the very best practices of external coaches and what are the very best practices of internal leaders who use coaching. And here's what we found. We found that there were these 3 timeless principles that fell within both of those realms. The first was earning the right to coach, and I talked a little bit about this. Earning the right to coach is around really being invited into a coaching relationship with someone. The second piece, and I'll talk about all 3 of these principles in a little greater detail. The second timeless principle is called a perfect partnership. What we found is that in the more coach-like relationships, there was this perfect storm of a partnership between the leader coach and his or her talent and the people whom he or she led. And the third piece was the ability and the willingness to engage in a dangerous conversation. Now, sometimes when people see dangerous conversations, they think it's dangerous because someone's getting hurt. When we talk about dangerous conversations here, we talk about a dangerous conversation in that it's a conversation where the outcome isn't already fixed. Dangerous conversation is dangerous in that I don't know really how this conversation is going to go, but I'm going to engage in it anyway in order to build capabilities within the folks whom I lead. The first piece of the Great Expectations coaching model is around earning the right to coach. Just because I'm a leader, I can't really assume the mantle of coach. Coaching isn't something I do to someone. Coaching is a relationship I form with someone. I need to decide that I want to coach someone, and they need to decide that they want to be coached by me. When you think about the person that you identified as your personal best coach, I'd like for you to think about what did he or she do that helped earn them the right to coach you. What do you think they did or said, or how did they show up in the room that helped him or her earn the right to coach you? My guess is, and from speaking with others and from some of the research we've done, my guess is that they showed up as authentic. They displayed integrity. They lived their values. You trusted them. Here's the other thing that earns us the right to coach. As a coach, really my intention is to build the performance in others. My intention is all about the talent. It's not about me when I'm coaching. I earn the right to coach when I make it about the other person. Key to being invited into that relationship is earning the right to coach by being authentic in the room, being someone of integrity who really lives the values that I stand for, and really it's about making it all about them and them knowing that it's about them and not about me. The second piece of the model, the second piece of the Great Expectations model is around a perfect partnership. And the image that we use is around two chairs side by side. Instead of what you typically would think about with a boss and a direct report where they would sit across the table from one another, coaching is about a peer-to-peer relationship. It's earning the right, being invited into a coaching relationship, and it's being able to sit side by side and making it all about the talent. When we look at perfect partnership, what we saw was that these perfect partnerships had three characteristics. The first characteristic of the perfect partnership was appreciation. The coach really appreciated and saw the best in the talent, the person whom they led. They also were able to confront them with their potential. They were able to hold the mirror up to them and show them their potential. And the third piece was around accountability. They really knew what was theirs, and they knew it was the talent, the person whom they led, and they held them accountable to living up to that potential. If you take a look at appreciation, and the image that's about to come up on your screen shows a hand with a golden egg. Now, the image we use for appreciation is this golden egg. If you think about it, we can look at this egg in two ways. We can look at this egg as a misshapen, discolored, flawed object, or we can look at this egg as a beautiful golden piece of art. Now, I don't know about you, but I certainly would prefer to be seen as golden than discolored, misshapen, and flawed. Appreciation is about looking at what's right with something instead of leading with a critical eye. So it's about looking at someone and not looking at what's wrong with them, but about leading with what's right with them, about looking for the strengths that they bring and appreciating the strengths that they bring to work every day. Let me give you an example. I grew up as a soccer player, so I played my whole life, and I now have two little girls. So when my oldest was old enough to play soccer, I thought, gee, I'm going to coach her team. I thought it was a great fit. I coach as part of what I do for a living, and I grew up playing soccer. So picture 5-year-old girls on a soccer field. My guess is many of you have seen small children play soccer. And my guess is what you have seen is a soccer ball in the middle of the field with every child sort of glommed around the soccer ball. And then, of course, you have the flower picker, and you have the cloud watcher, and you have the child who likes to draw pictures in the sand. And then picture me, who thinks I'm a good coach, on the sideline screaming, move here, move there, you're on offense, you don't need to be there. literally, that coaching impact diagram that I showed with directing, advising, teaching, coaching, I was so far to the directing side that it was ridiculous. I was off the chart. I thought, gee, I know what I'm talking about. I can give them direction and help them improve their capabilities as soccer players. The kids got no better, and I was so frustrated by the end of the season. After the season was over, I said to my daughter, "Don't you love soccer?" And she sort of laughed and said, "It's okay." And I thought, what is wrong with this child? Like, this is the greatest sport ever. And then I took a look at myself, and I said, what did I do to build these kids' love of the sport? I certainly didn't coach them. I directed them. I yelled. I screamed. I directed. So I decided the next season perhaps I should employ some of what I do for a living into this soccer team. So here's what I decided to do. The gentleman that I coach with and I decided that at every practice we were going to not lead with a critical edge, not lead with a directive edge. We were going to lead with an appreciative eye. We were going to look for what every child did right at each game. So instead of looking for what they did wrong, we recognized this one had a great throw-in, or that one really was a great team player, or that one had a wonderful attitude. After every game, we sent out an email to the team recognizing and appreciating what each child did right. And we continued to do this throughout the season, not really knowing the kind of impact it had. Well, we started to recognize that the kids were having a ton more fun on the field. And about the third or fourth week, one of the parents called me and she said, "You know, I've been talking to the other parents. Could you send your email out right after the game? Because our kids wait by the computer until your email arrives." Think about it. These are 5-year-old kids playing soccer. I've heard parents tell me that their kids' confidence has increased from getting a note once a week about what they did well on the soccer field. Think about the impact that we can have within organizations as leaders by leading with an appreciative eye. This is the kind of impact we can have on 5-year-old girls on the soccer field. So appreciation, critical to a perfect partnership within an organization. I don't know if any of you have ever panned for gold, but appreciation is a little bit like panning for gold. If you think about panning for gold, really you have to get through a lot of the mud and the muck to look for that golden speck. And from what I hear, once you find it, one golden speck, you start to find many more. They call it golden eye. Appreciation is about that. Appreciation is looking for what's golden in other people. My guess is once we see one thing, it leads to another. The second part of the perfect partnership is around confrontation. So if the first part is around that mining for gold, that appreciation piece, the second piece is confronting people with their potential. It's confronting people with who they are, what their potential is, and perhaps when they're selling themselves short. Oftentimes when people see the word confrontation, they think of confrontation as sort of a negative word, where really I'm going up with against somebody with my boxing gloves. Confrontation is less about boxing and more about confronting people with when they're selling themselves short. So again, it's about appreciating them. It's about recognizing their potential, letting them know what that potential is, and then holding them accountable for that, which is the third piece of the perfect partnership. Accountability is a huge piece around coaching, because coaching really is just a conversation unless the talent does something different as a result of our conversation together. Accountability really is what's going to change as a result of our conversation. Accountability for the coach is also knowing what's my stuff and what I need to take care of and what's their stuff, and how can I grow their capabilities by letting them sort of deal and think about their own stuff and take ownership of their own stuff. In their wonderful book, Unleashed, Greg Thompson and Suzanne Biro give the example, and they use the metaphor of leaving the talent, leaving the people whom we lead every day in the puddle. And they talk about it this way. They said, well, sometimes when we're leading in organizations, the folks whom we lead will come into us thrashing around, saying, I have this huge problem. I'm drowning in an ocean. And really, they think they're drowning in this huge ocean. And as a leader, you look at them and you think, really, they're floundering in a 3-inch puddle of water. Now, we have a choice as a coach and as a leader. The easy thing as a coach is I reach into the puddle and I pull them out, 3 inches of water. Think about it. When I reach in and pull people out of the puddle, I'm taking accountability for their stuff. It's easy for me because I can get it done, and it's also nice for me because I'm feeling helpful. But how much capability am I building if I pull them out of the puddle every time? My guess is if I pull them out of the puddle, I reach in and pull them out of the puddle, and they think they're thrashing in this ocean, 3 weeks from now they're going to come back into our office. I'm drowning in an ocean, and I'm going to pull them out of the puddle again. So how can we as leaders coach them to look around and realize that they're in a puddle, that they're not drowning in an ocean? Have them realize what their possibilities are, what are their options, and what are the steps they can take to walk out of the puddle themselves. We think about it, leaving talent in the puddle really is about building this capability. I love this image about this plant growing sort of in that puddle because that's what coaching is about. Coaching is about helping people to take stock of the fact that they're in a puddle, they're not drowning in an ocean, and being able to get up and walk out. And that's how we build capabilities within the folks in our organization. The last ring of the Great Expectations model is around dangerous conversations. Now, I talked before about a dangerous conversation isn't dangerous because someone's going to get hurt. Really, it's dangerous because we engage and we willingly engage in a conversation that we don't necessarily know the ending. We can't predict what's going to happen. Think about the conversations you have at work every day. Meetings all have agendas. And a meeting with someone and you know exactly how you want it to go. Conversation with someone, you have your objectives down of what I want to get from this call. Think about sort of the social conversations you have in the hallway. I walk down the hallway and I say, "Hi, Sue," and Sue says back to me without looking, "I'm great, Joan. How are you?" And I think to myself, well, I didn't really ask. Think about it. So many of our conversations are social lubricant, and they're predictable. A coaching conversation is different. It's dangerous because we can't predict the outcome. If you think about it, a wonderful metaphor for dangerous conversation is skiing in fresh snow. If you think about making fresh tracks in snow, it's not skiing sort of the same trail that everyone has skied before us. It's about making those fresh tracks for ourselves and not knowing what the snow is going to be like underneath. When we talk about a dangerous conversation, a coaching conversations, oftentimes we'll talk about the flow. There are 3 pieces to a coaching conversation. And those 3 pieces aren't linear. They can happen at any point. There's not one, then the other, then the other. The 3 pieces of the coaching conversations are most typically discovery. That's where really you're looking at performance potential. You're seeking out potential in the person whom you're coaching. The second piece is around creation, where you're looking and you're helping them to generate possibilities. You're helping them to look at things from a fresh perspective. You're helping them to generate options for themselves. And the last piece is around commitment. Again, coaching is just talk unless someone does something as a result of our conversation. The last piece around the coaching flow is around commitment. What will change as a result of our conversation? One of the tools that we use is the power of the question. And when you think about coaching conversations, and if I don't want to give advice and I don't want to tell war stories, one of the ways that I can build capabilities is by asking some really potent questions of folks. And again, a huge, powerful tool is by asking some really powerful questions. And you're about to see come up on your slide, we have in our organization 60 big coaching questions. Now, you can't really see them on the screen. I'm going to bring Julie on in a minute. She's going to tell you how you can get a copy of these. Our 60 big coaching questions fall into, there's 20 for each, those 3 pieces of the coaching flow. So we believe that the power of the question is huge. And we've seeded the deck with some questions that as a leader coach, you may find helpful when you're looking to coach for discovery, or you're looking to coach for creation, or you're looking to coach for commitment. Julie, you mind coming on for a minute here?
Absolutely, Joan. So Joan's going to go through some samples of these questions and go over some of these questions with you in the next couple of minutes. But if you'd like to have a copy of these 60 big coaching questions, you can actually find them in the coaching ebook, the ebook version of Unleashed, which is the book that Joan referred to earlier on in the webinar, written by Greg Thompson and Suzanne Biro. And so we have an ebook version of that. I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone who's registered for this webinar, that will include a link to this ebook. But for those of you who are very anxious and want to get it today, want to download this today, you can find it at our website at www.bluepointleadership.com, and it's in our Leadership Development Resources section. It's the coaching ebook. So that's where you can find it today if you're very anxious.
Thanks, Julie. And again, we'll invite you to take a look at them. I would like to go through just a few of the questions on these 60 big coaching questions. And again, the first 20 are around coaching for discovery. When I'm coaching someone and I'm looking at performance potential, I want to look at some of the questions around coaching for discovery. And some of those questions include this. For what do you want to be known? I mean, think about it. What if somebody asked you that question? What legacy do you want to leave? For what do you want to be known? Think about what it would be like to ask the people whom you lead every day, what do they want to be known for? Another question from Coaching for Discovery is, when you're at your best, what are you doing? What if you ask that of the folks whom you lead every day? When you're at your best, what are you doing? Sometimes what we see folks doing every day isn't necessarily what they think they're best at. Wouldn't this be a great opportunity to uncover some hidden talents within our workforce? Another question around Coaching for Discovery is, what inspires you? You know, what gets you up in the morning? What makes you tick? What lights that fire? What ignites your performance? What if somebody asked you what inspires you? My guess is many of us assume that what inspires us inspires others. Have we ever asked people, you know, what gets you out of bed in the morning? So again, just a sample of some of the Coaching for Discovery questions. The next 20 questions on the list are around coaching for creation. We talk about coaching for creation. Really, it's about looking at what are the possibilities. What are options? What kinds of things can people think about in terms of looking at things from a fresh perspective than they've looked at them before? Give you some samples of those questions. One is, what would happen if you really took your foot off the brake? Think about it. What would happen if you really took your foot off the brake? If you let yourself take your foot off the brake? Second question is, what's the most exciting outcome you can imagine? So think about it. You have someone in the puddle. They think they're drowning in an ocean. Talk about, you know, all right, so you have this huge issue that you're struggling with. What's the most exciting outcome? What's the best outcome you can imagine? And then having a conversation that results from that discussion. Another question in these 20 is, how can you get others eager to be involved? How can you inspire others? How can you get others on board? You know, you seem to be really fired up about this. How can you fire others around you up? So it's having those kinds of conversations. The last 20 questions on our 60 big coaching questions are coaching for commitment questions. You know, this is sort of where the rubber hits the road. These are the questions that talk about change, about what will people do differently as a result of the conversation. And those questions, a couple of questions sound like this. What do you need to do so you do not have regrets? Imagine that. What do you need to do so you do not have regrets? Here's another sample. What promises will you make to others? Leaders, we found, use different language than others. Leaders use language like promises, commitment. What if you ask people, what promises will you make to others? What commitment will you make to others? How will you ensure that changes are enduring? Sometimes after we coach, people are all gung-ho about the conversation. They've committed to stuff. Well, how will you ensure that these changes are enduring? What kinds of things should we look at in terms of milestones? Tennessee Williams said, life is an unanswered question, but let's still believe in the dignity and the importance of the question. Another power tool, like the power of the question, the power of silence. Now think about it. In the U.S.,
Hey, Joan, we're just getting some feedback.
Okay.
And I wonder if you just need to mute or maybe go to your audio panel and make sure you've got it selected, use telephone.
Yeah, I did.
Just click on that use telephone again.
Okay.
And I think we're good.
This, folks. Okay,
nope, that's okay. The feedback has gone. So if you want to just go ahead and continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, so the second piece I'd like to talk about, we talked about the power of the big question. The second piece is the power of silence. Now think about it. In the U.S., if you're in an elevator, What's the one topic of conversation that people always bring up? Weather, right? Anytime you get into an elevator in the U.S., weather always comes up as a conversation because it's interesting. No, weather comes up as a conversation because we want to fill the silence. An elevator is sort of this small, intimate piece of space, and we want to fill the silence with something. So we talk about the weather. It's sunny out, it's raining out, it's this, it's that. Think about the power of using silence in a coaching conversation. This is the toughest for me. I'm from New York, so I tend to like to fill the silence with all sorts of chatter. Silence in a coaching conversation is so powerful. Think about it. Oftentimes when I'm speaking, I'm talking, and then I let the person whom I'm coaching talk. And while they're talking, am I listening to them 100%? Sometimes I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next. When we use the power tool of silence, we give the room space. We give silence to the room. I ask my question. I give space for them to answer. They answer. I give space before I talk so that I can really listen to them. Susan Scott said in her wonderful book, Fierce Conversations, she said, let silence do the heavy lifting. Here's my hope. My hope is that your next conversation with folks, give it a try. Let silence do some of the heavy lifting in your coaching conversation. Really listen to people. Give silence. Give the room some silence. Give them some space to think. Throughout the course of the webinar, really we talked about our Great Expectations coaching model. We talked about earning the right to coach. We talked about a perfect partnership. We talked about having dangerous conversations, being willing to have dangerous conversations. I'd like to end the webinar with this quote, which I just love. It says, the most powerful weapon on earth is the human soul on fire. I believe that coaching gives us a way to light the human soul on fire by really letting people live up to the potential we see in them, by appreciating what people bring to work every day. And I believe we can light that human soul at work, and it can transfer back outside of work. I'd like for you to invite you to share with me some of your success stories, some of what's worked for you in terms of coaching. If you want to ask me questions, my email address is up on the screen. I'd be happy to answer what questions you have and engage in a coach-like conversation over email with you.